Hi there, my name's Freddy Vinehill-Cliffe. I'm the product specialist for Nugen Audio. So I'm the person who does all these kinds of tutorial videos. I also write blogs for our website with hints and tips on how to use the plugins. And I'm also someone who you're quite likely to see at any in-person events whenever those start happening again. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our newest plugin, which is Paragon. Paragon is a reverb plugin which allows you to create your own impulse responses from decomposed and resynthesized impulse responses of real spaces. So effectively you can create new authentic IRs with the character of existing spaces but with your own custom parameters. So Paragon is a convolution reverb, a true convolution reverb, but it offers you the level of control and flexibility of an algorithmic reverb. It also runs in up to 712 channels of audio, so that means it's suitable for Dolby Atmos bed tracks. It's actually the only convolution reverb which supports that number of channels. The closest kind of competitor would be something like Altiverb XL, which I believe only runs in 5.1. So this has 4 additional channels over and above that. So it's perfect if you're working on, film or TV, or any application that requires Dolby Atmos. So like I said, today I'm going to show you how to create your own impulse response and get your audio from sounding like this.
'Twas brillig and the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the wabe.
To sounding like this.
'Twas brillig and the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the wabe.
So that's Alan Drake reading Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky, for if you're interested. That reverb sound is a custom impulse response that I have quickly made just now before starting the video. It's really straightforward to make a new custom impulse response. This technology was developed alongside the University of York. A guy called Dr. Jez Wells from the university has developed this entirely new method of reverb convolution, which decomposes and resynthesizes an impulse response in order to allow you to tweak the decay time, the room size, the pre-delay, the brightness, the frequency-specific decay time, all kinds of different parameters of the reverb without introducing artifacts, without time stretching, without adding or removing samples. So you have all that flexibility. You still have the realistic sound of a convolution reverb, which, as you probably know, is much more realistic than an algorithmic reverb because it is based on a real sound of a real space. So you have all that, but with the tweakability of an algorithmic reverb. So what I'm going to do is reset all of my settings within Paragon back to the default. So that we are truly having and hearing the sort of if it'll work, hang on. So that we are truly hearing and seeing the impulse response as it is, and then we can tweak things to our liking from there. So first of all, if I'm creating my own new reverb sound in Paragon, I want to load in one of the modeled IRs from our library, which comes included with Paragon. At the moment, it isn't possible to load your own impulse response into Paragon. That's because there is a lot of processing involved in order to allow us to do the additional decomposition and resynthesis and so on. There are more processes that are involved before you can load an impulse response into Paragon than with another standard convolution reverb. And that's quite time consuming. It's something that we need to do in the office. So at the moment, it's just the stock IRs that are included with Paragon. However, we don't feel that that's such a drawback because due to the level of flexibility Within Paragon, you can still create practically any reverb sound that you desire. And on top of that, it means that you don't have to have a huge library of impulse responses taking up a lot of space on your machine. You don't need to have 10 different church impulse responses. You have one church impulse response, and then you can tweak that to create 10 different church sounds, which all retain the real authentic character of the church sound, but with different sizes, different decay times, different pre-delay, different frequency response, so on and so forth. It's worth mentioning as well at this point that all the impulse responses are B format ambisonic recordings. We commissioned a bespoke library of impulse responses for the plugin because prior to this there wasn't a high enough quality library of 3D impulse response recordings of this number of spaces. So this is a bespoke library that we've commissioned specifically for Paragon. So let's go ahead and choose one of these. For the purposes of this video, it doesn't necessarily matter which one we choose. If you go to our website, you can download a free trial of Paragon. Lasts for 15 days. It's fully featured. There's no limitations. I would recommend trying out all of these yourself because they all have really unique, wonderful characters. And you can create a sort of entire world of sounds within Paragon. But for today, I think I'm going to go with the stairwell impulse response. Let's go with that. So when I load in a new impulse response, you can see at the top here the spectrogram changes. And that's showing us the frequency response, the decay time, and so on of different frequencies within this impulse response. Below that, we have our EQ controls. Within the EQ, we're able to control the amplitude of individual frequencies. In fact, actually, I haven't set that to 0, so just bear with me. There we go. You can set the amplitude of individual frequencies, and you can also set the frequency-specific decay time. That is what I think is especially useful because it means that rather than reducing or increasing the decay time of the entire reverb, you can zone in on a particular region, and that has a different effect to just turning down that particular frequency. Maybe you don't want that frequency quieter, you just want it to ring out for less time without affecting the reverb time of the entire thing. So that's the frequency specific decay time, but there is also a standard sort of amplitude based EQ as well. So before we do anything, like I say, everything's basically set stock. Before I do anything, let's just hear the reverb as it is. So this is the stairwell with nothing changed.
'Twas brilliant the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the wave, all mimsy were the boragos and the moanraths outgrabe.
So it's not a particularly long reverb. It's, I guess, relatively boxy sounding. I mean, it sounds like a stairwell because it is a stairwell. What I'm interested in is maybe getting rid of some of the sort of boxier mid frequencies. So what I'm going to do is add one node to my amplitude EQ curve. I'm looking at probably around, I don't know, around 600 hertz or so. Let's see how that sounds now. I'm going to just take out a chunk of that and give it a little bit of a wider Q as well.
'Twas brilliant the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in.
So that to me is already sounding more pleasing. What I'd also like to do is perhaps just give a little bit of a longer decay in some of the higher frequencies. So I'm going to add a node and then just increase the decay time just to give it a little bit of excitement up in those top frequencies, maybe around about 13 kilohertz. Let's hear how that sounds.
'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave.
So again, that to me, it's sounding a little bit clearer. It's got a little bit more of the character that I want, but it still has the authentic sound of the stairwell where that impulse response was recorded. I've just kind of exaggerated and accentuated certain aspects of that sound to fit what I'm trying to achieve. You can see as well that as I'm making these changes, the spectrogram does change at the top here. So this is kind of an ongoing spectrogram graph. It's not just the stock IR, this is actually showing us the changes we've made as well. Next to the EQ, you do also have this complexity control. That is used for, let me think of the best way of putting this. That is used to control the amount of detail involved in the reverb model. So if you have a very sparse mix and you want a nice thick reverb that's going to take up a lot of space and bring a lot of excitement, you might want to set the complexity high. If you've already got quite a cluttered mix and you don't want the reverb to be taking up a lot of real estate, then you might turn down the complexity. And you can see the as you're changing the complexity, the frequency display here changes as well. So you've got a lot of visual feedback going on anytime you change any control within Paragon. So again, let's just have a quick listen to that, maybe a bit further on in the poem.
He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the Maxone foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought.
So there we are. Again, it's sounding a little bit less boxy, a little bit less boomy, and you've just got a nice little bit of kind of sparkle, a little bit of shimmer at the top, which is something that I quite like. So that's within the IR panel itself. In the main panel, we have control over things like the pre-delay, the decay time, the room size. I don't think I want to make the room any bigger, but I would like just a little bit more decay time. So I'm going to turn that up slightly here. So from 1 to 1.24. That value, by the way, is the reason that's set as a multiplier is because that doesn't dictate the overall decay time. What it dictates is a multiplication of the original decay time. So if it's set at 1, the decay time for each impulse response isn't going to be the same. It's going to be whatever the decay time for that particular space was. You can see here, just above the pre-delay and decay controls, there is a measurement of the reverb time. So at the moment, that's 310 milliseconds. Let's hear this again. Where are we at with this?
He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the Maxone foe he sought.
Again, I think that's getting close to the kind of sound that I want. While I'm here on the main panel as well, I can solo individual tracks if I just want to hear the left or just the right.
Where the jub bird and shun the frimulous bandersnatch.
And if you're working in surround, if you're working in Dolby Atmos, for example, you can do the exact same thing for all 10 surround channels in your Dolby Atmos bed track. I'd also quite like to add a little bit of pre-delay, not a huge amount, just a small amount. Let's hear how that sounds.
'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave.
Cool. So quite subtle, not that noticeable, but I just wanted a little bit of something added in there, just a smidge. You'll notice as well, whenever I change one of these parameters, so for example, if I push the decay time a little bit higher, I think because we're working in stereo, it's not taking particularly long to do things. But if it is recalculating, you get a spinning wheel in the top right here. So I think because we're working in stereo, the calculations aren't as complicated right now. But if you're working in Dolby Atmos 10 channels and you've got quite a complex reverb sound going on, you might get the spinning loading wheel in the top right. And we would recommend not playing any audio through Paragon while that's happening, because it's not going to sound as you're expecting. It sometimes needs just a few seconds to settle to figure out exactly what it's doing. And for that reason, we don't generally recommend that you would use Paragon in a situation that requires a lot of automation. In fact, by default, a lot of the controls within Paragon aren't able to be automated. It is possible to change that. You can go into the back-end menu. So you click on the Nugen logo, you click credits and options, and there is an option here called automate all parameters. That's switched off by default. I've actually got it switched on already. But the thought behind that is that it allows you to automate a lot more of the parameters, but it's designed only to be used in quite specific situations, because we don't want you to end up causing problems for yourself. What I would say with that is a lot of our beta testers will have a session set up where they have perhaps 2 instances of Paragon on 2 different aux tracks, and they alternate between those for each scene in a TV show or in a film. They'll have one instance of Paragon being used for one scene, and the other instance will be bypassed during that scene, and all the automation will be happening on the bypassed instance of Paragon, not so that live automation can happen within that scene, but so that the next reverb state for the next scene can be calculated in the background, meaning that there's not going to be live calculations going on in Paragon while it's trying to produce reverb sounds as well. I think I will do another shorter video on that probably at some point, because it's a little bit convoluted to explain, and it's probably something that you'd need a visual aid for, but that's just a little bit about the automation. Back to what we're doing here and now. So I've changed some of the controls on the main panel here. I'm maybe just going to turn down the brightness a little bit as well, just because I don't want to go too overboard now that I've EQ'd a little bit more top end into the impulse response. So let's hear that.
'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy would have...
So I'm fairly happy with that. Another thing that's worth mentioning is I've got Paragon on an aux track in this project, so my mix control is on 100%. But if you decided to use Paragon as an insert, then you might have the mix value set differently. And when you do that, you do get a slightly different color display, so I'll quickly show you that now.
So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought.
So you have the wet signal in orange in the kind of haze view, and the dry control in blue. I believe you can change those colors as well. Yeah, so you can change the colors. I quite like them as they are, but if you maybe have several instances of Paragon in the same project, you might want to use different colors to differentiate them, or you might just do it for personal preference because you think it looks pretty. There's nothing wrong with that. So moving on to some of the other controls, we have the I/O panel here, which gives a little bit more of a detailed control of what's going on with individual channels within Paragon. This is a bit more useful when you're working on a surround application. For the purposes of the video today, I'm working in stereo just because you'll only be able to hear stereo watching this video anyway. But I'll show you what's going on with these, bearing in mind that you might be less likely to use these features in stereo. It's more the kind of thing where you would have left and right pairs around the surround field, and you'd be tweaking the pairs relative to each other rather than tweaking within an individual pair. So from left to right, you've got trim controls for the input and the output for each channel. You have individual high pass and low pass filters for each channel. So on the main GUI, you have an overall global high pass and low pass. But say, for example, I don't know, if I wanted additional to the overall high pass and low pass, maybe I wanted to get rid of everything above about 10 kilohertz in the right channel. It's unlikely I'd want to do that. I mean, I'll show you how that sounds now.
So rested he by the tum-tum tree.
So that to me is quite strange sounding. It's not something I would personally be likely to do in a project, but the option is there. And when you're working in surround, that's the sort of thing that can be really useful. You might also want to control the pre-delay individually. So you have a global pre-delay control here, but say, for example, I want the left to be delayed an extra 5 milliseconds. I can do that.
'Twas brilligan the slitty toes.
Still fairly subtle. I mean, I could do that. You know, a really significant one of those. How does that sound?
'Twas brilligan the slitty toes did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy would have...
Starts to sound a little bit more odd, although it's not, you know, a major thing. I'm just having fun now here, really.
'Twas brilligan the slitty toe.
There you go. That's where it starts to sound quite strange. Again, it's unlikely you'd use that within a left-right pair, but if you're working in surround where you've got, you know, your center, you have left and right, you've got your left and right sides, your left and right behind, you might even have above, then that's the kind of thing that can be a really useful way of creating more space within a mix, more space within a project, so on and so forth. You also have individual decay controls. Perhaps you want a longer or a shorter decay on one side than the other. You have individual crosstalk controls. I haven't actually spoken much about the crosstalk, so I'll get onto that in a minute. And you have individual wet-dry bypass controls. So these are all controls that you have global controls for on the front GUI. The front GUI, can't even speak. And then you have individual channel controls here, so that's for really, really detailed, in-depth tweaking of whatever reverb sound you're working towards. So whatever you do on the I/O panel is additional to the main panel. So if you've got 3 milliseconds here, and then you add an extra 8, just for the sake of argument, to the left channel, then the left channel overall is actually going to have a pre-delay of 11 milliseconds, and the right channel is still just going to be 3. So it's fairly intuitive, but just in case those things aren't immediately obvious, I thought it'd be worth me quickly explaining. Like I say, I didn't get onto the crosstalk, so I'm going to quickly explain that now. The crosstalk control dictates the amount of interaction between different channels in your mix. Different reverb channels in your mix. Again, this is something that's much more likely to be used in a surround application, but you could still use it in a stereo application as well. If you have the crosstalk on 0, then it means that the dry audio from the left channel is only being sent to the left channel reverb, and the dry audio from the right channel is only being sent to the right channel reverb. If you have the crosstalk on 100%, and there's loads of cross-contamination between them, and you want to strike a balance between those, because obviously in real life, your crosstalk is... Sorry, I'm using the wrong words to describe here. In real life, audio reverberates in all directions. It's not specifically, you know, stuff that's happening on your left side isn't only reverberating on the right. Stuff that's happening on your right side isn't only reverberating on the right. But at the same time, you don't want to have too much intermingling between channels, because that's just going to cause a cluttered mix. So the trick is to set the balance right with the crosstalk so that you've still got plenty of transient detail, you've still got plenty of clarity in the mix, but you still want a realistic mix. You want a real sense of space and a real sense of place. And as I said, in the I/O panel, you have individual controls as well. So those are set by default to about 70%. So the overall crosstalk is kind of the global control for that. And then additional to that, you have these controls as well. and it's cumulative. The left and right individual crosstalks plus the front panel crosstalk. The really cool thing as well about the I/O panel, which I think I've neglected to mention, is that when you play audio, in the bottom right here, you have the sort of radar view from the main panel. So on the main panel, you've got it here.
Long time the Max on foe he saw it.
And you have your level meters in the bottom right. When you're on the I/O panel, the level meters disappear.
Long time the Max on foe he saw it.
You have the radar view in the bottom right there. So as with everything, like I say, there's a lot of visual feedback throughout everything that you do in Paragon. So let's just have a bit of a listen through. I'm going to play maybe even the whole poem. Why not? Let's go crazy.
'Twas brillig and the slitty toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves and the momraths outgrabe. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jub bird, and shun the frimulous bandersnatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand. Long time the Max on foe he sought. So rested he by the tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy. O frabulous day, halloo, Calais! He chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slitty toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the momraths outgrabe.
So that's how the reverb is sounding. That's an impulse response I've created, a new authentic impulse response that I've created in my Pro Tools session today. And you can do the same thing with Paragon. The other thing that's worth mentioning is that attendees of IMSTA Fest are all able to get a 50% discount on another one of our plugins, Sigmod. So Sigmod is a modular kind of utility belt plugin with 13 different modules. In fact, I'll quickly show you Sigmod. Just so you can see what you're getting. So Sigmod is a modular utility belt plugin. It has 13 different single process modules, which all allow you to achieve one simple task. Normally this would be $49, and for IMSTA attendees, it's $29. The coolest things that I like within Sigmod are the mid-side encoder and decoder. So if I add in those and I add in an insert module here, essentially what I'm able to do is convert my left-right stereo signal into a mid-side signal and then back again. And I can insert a third-party plugin in the middle, and it essentially allows me to use any stereo plugin in mid-side mode, which is pretty special. It means that you can do that even if whatever third-party plugin you're using doesn't have a mid-side mode natively. I think that's just about everything I've got time for today. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of IMSTA Fest. As I said, my name's Freddy Vinehill-Cliffe. I'm the product specialist for Nugen Audio. Be sure to check out more of our videos if you go to the Nugen website. And if you're interested in Paragon or you're interested in Sigmod, go to our website. You can download a 15-day free trial. Fully featured, no limitations, just a time limit. And yeah, that's about everything. Thank you very much. Cheers.